Today we're going to take a look at something a little bit different. It's a gaming projector by BenQ, specifically the TH685. So this is a unit that they sent me for free. They said I can keep it in exchange for a review. I'm going to tell you my honest opinion on the device, like with everything on the channel, so I'll tell you what I like and don't like about it. I've never had a projector, which is one of the reasons I agreed. I wanted to see what a modern projector is like to use in comparison to what I'm used to. I do most of my console and computer gaming, or everything actually, like editing on a 24-inch BenQ RL2455HM, as it's romantically referred to. I also have a Sony Bravia 40-inch 1080p TV, a KDL40R550C, which I play games on somewhat frequently as well. So those are my main frames of reference. The BenQ is basically a 1080p gaming monitor I bought several years ago because it seemed to have good reviews, plus its response time is very quick. And the Sony TV is a decent looking 1080p TV. The BenQ TH685 projector in terms of picture quality beats everything I have, which it should since it's considerably more expensive. $799 US is what BenQ's website has it listed as. I have it set up on an 80-inch Amazon Basics projection screen in a completely dark environment, and it looks amazing. 60 to 200 inches is what the projector can handle, so in terms of dollar per inch, projectors are still the best value. I didn't notice any bad input lag, no smearing or blurring when moving around quickly, color reproduction looks good, and the image manages to be very bright and detailed without blowing your eyeballs into another stratosphere, like regular LCD TVs can do. Less eye strain is a fundamental advantage of projectors, which also means that some projector disadvantage show themselves too. Like that rainbow effect, for example, but we'll get into that later. Let's start from the beginning. This is what you get out of the box. A little remote which takes AAA batteries, a quick start guide, VGA cable, power cord, and if you look close enough, there's a projector in there as well. It has several inputs, 2 HDMI 2.2 ports, a 5V 2.5 amp USB port if you need to power a Roku or something of that sort, VGA in and out. You can use a component to VGA cable for other analog sources like older consoles, for example. It has audio in and out through two 3.5mm ports. I really wish there was an optical out. From what I can see, projectors tend to not have those, probably because most people will just run it through an HDMI receiver, but it would add some flexibility in certain situations. There's also an RS-232 port, which we consumers aren't supposed to play with, apparently. The rest seems quite straightforward. Zoom and focus, just like a camera lens. Buttons on the top that do things. There's 3 feet on the bottom that go up and down to adjust placement. And there are mounting holes if you want to hang it on the ceiling upside down. Let me tell you how I've got it set up. In my case, the projector is almost exactly 2 meters away from the screen, and it's outputting an image that's slightly smaller than 80 inches diagonally. The on-screen setup portion can be done either in simple or advanced mode. I set it to advanced to see all the options. It's pretty straightforward. The automatic Keystone Correction seems to work just fine. I left most things the way they were in terms of color balance since it looked relatively neutral. BenQ claims 95% adherence to REC.709 color space, or is it REC? I'm not sure how it's pronounced. The color balance is set to cold because neutral ended up looking way too yellowish. I'm not sure if that was set up that way from the factory or if I did it, but anyways, that's what I have it set to, just so you know. There's also a slider for sharpness and color saturation, which I turned down a bit because it was making the image look a bit too exaggerated. Fast mode is turned on, which apparently reduces response time. The manual states that Keystone Correction, digital lens shift, which brings the image up or down a bit, and overscan should be set to 0. I had Keystone Correction at -3, I think, but I didn't notice any input lag or anything like that. The consoles I tried were the PS4, Xbox One S, and the Nintendo Switch. Let's get into the picture quality. It's a 1080p 120Hz HDR projector. It will support 4K sources, but of course they will be displayed at 1920 by 1080. Obviously, my camera can't really pick up what I'm really seeing in real life, so I'll do my best to describe what I'm actually seeing. The camera footage really doesn't capture the dynamic range of the image, and it looks bloomy, which isn't how things look in real life at all. But hey, it's a video and you gotta look at something, right? I already briefly mentioned a few points about the image quality. The image can be very bright. It outputs up to 3,500 lumens. which from after doing a bit of research seems to be pretty bright. In a completely dark environment, that's kinda overkill, and I don't have to set it that bright. Actually, you don't want to because there will be a bloom effect that's not exactly, the best thing ever. But the available brightness is more for instances where the room is lit up for one reason or another. Basically, the more ambient lighting you introduce, the grayer the blacks become, and the more desaturated the colors get, so the extra brightness helps compensate for that. Personally, I would only use a projector in a fully blacked out room, but not everybody does or can. The projector does have an ambient light sensor, so the device can change brightness automatically. If you use a projector in a dark room most of the time, I recommend turning it off or calibrating the function. In the beginning, I had an instance where in bright scenes the light would reflect off the screen onto the walls, which really lit up the room. And then the projector was like, hey, it's getting brighter, let's turn up the brightness. So that's a really annoying effect you want to avoid. I thought the contrast was pretty good. There's a lot of detail even on games that don't support HDR. Projectors generally don't have as good black levels compared to a lot of the TVs. So in other words, blacks are more like dark grays, I guess. I didn't really notice it that much. Mostly it's in the darkest of scenes where you'd see it. But some people may find something like that distracting or very noticeable. HDR is a game changer for me. I think it adds a lot to the overall image. HDR stands for High Dynamic Range, and what it does is preserve details that normally would get obscured. For example, in really light and bright areas, for example, snow-capped mountains, you can see much more details and texture instead of just a white blob. And the same thing applies to the shadows too. You can set the HDR brightness in the settings, and 1+ seems to look the most natural. The TH685 is a DLP projector, and some of you may know about the rainbow effect they are prone to display. And I can see it. If you're not used to seeing the effect, it's quite noticeable. I heard that some people are more susceptible to seeing it than others. For me, it's especially visible in or on text in menus. And also if you move your head around, or just your eyes. Sometimes high contrast areas will just have a little bit of a rainbow thing going on. During regular gaming, I don't generally notice it. Like I said before, there's no blurring, smearing, or ghosting when moving around, unless the game has motion blur effects. Games feel responsive. Input lag is advertised as being 8.3 milliseconds, and my BenQ monitor seems to be around 10, from what I've seen online from people who test these things. So that's pretty good. I think TVs are usually around 10, it just kind of depends on the model. There's various picture modes to choose from, but I always prefer to get the image as neutral as possible and leave it like that. It's worth mentioning that the game mode, or the gaming mode, does bring up the brightness of dark areas, so the idea is that you can see enemies more clearly, even if they're in dark areas of the map. It doesn't look as realistic, but possibly it's worth it for competitive situations. The projector does have speakers, or more precisely a speaker. It's just 5 watts, and honestly I don't think it sounds good. It at least sounds better than some phone speakers, which isn't really much of a compliment. I'm really into audio, so I'm not surprised that I didn't like the sound. I would highly recommend running it through a good sound system. Something else I'm not fond of is the remote. The buttons are really squishy, so changing settings is kind of a pain in the ass. I'm not expecting IBM BeamSpring level switches, but something less gummy bear spec would be nice. So overall, I'm quite impressed with the BenQ TH685. Even though I don't have 4K stuff, I notice how much higher resolution it is compared to 1080p whenever I see a 4K TV, so I'm surprised that the projector's lack of 4K didn't bother me that much. I guess the size of the image was what really impressed me, as well as the color reproduction and HDR. Good 4K budget projectors aren't things that really exist at the moment. The cheapest ones are still over $1,000. Actually, that's something worth bringing up. Do you go for a big 4K TV or a 1080p projector? It really depends. TVs are more convenient, especially when it comes to how they look with ambient light in the room. But projectors have a certain impact that's not just due to the size. It's hard to explain. Viewing angles are also great, there's less eye strain, and you could potentially save some space since you can put all the consoles and multimedia stuff behind your couch or something instead of in front. That allows you to be more flexible with furniture. And a pull-down screen can be installed virtually anywhere, like for example in front of a cabinet or some shelves. So you can have a really compact system. Also, if you're into 3D movies, then projectors like the BenQ we just looked at are basically your only options. So it really depends on what sort of things you value. For me, I've realized that I want an HDR monitor now that I've experienced the extra detail you get from it. I've been thinking about upping the resolution of my PC monitor and, that sort of thing, but that's another topic. I hope you found that interesting. Let me know what your experiences have been with projectors if you've used them. I'm still new to this stuff, so any pointers for learning more about various things related to the subject would be appreciated. Thank you to BenQ for sending the projector over. Thank you to my supporters, whether you're supporting through Patreon or the YouTube membership thing, it's really appreciated. Check out the links to the projector as well as Patreon, Twitter, and all of those things in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.